Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back, Land Development Academy. As always, we'll give you a few minutes to settle in, top up your coffee, get your notepad out if you're old school and you like to do paper notes. I also see someone's got an AI note taker. I don't know how I feel about that. But welcome, everyone. And we'll just take some time to get settled in before we get started. Today, we're going to be talking about water quality with Kenna Pierce. And she's going to be back with us in a couple more weeks to talk about drainage requirements. So we're continuing our water theme that we started a couple weeks ago. Was it last week? Oh my goodness, that was just last week. We talked about wetlands with John Clement. And that's how we're going to close out our 2025. So we've got one more presentation after this, and that'll be our last one of the year. And then we'll be starting back up again in January. I'll take this time to let everyone know or kind of remind you that if you've attended 2 sessions or more, you are eligible for a limited edition, limited supply, first come, first serve Land Development Academy mug. And so I have had some folks come down to the PDC and pick those up in the last week or so. Come get them while they're here. That's all I can say. You can email me and we can coordinate, but you do have to have attended 2 sessions in order to be eligible. And unfortunately, only presenter staff are eligible for a mug, but our staff that do attend these are not eligible for a mug. So you'll have to be a presenter if you want a mug as a City of Austin staffer. So we'll give it a couple more minutes for folks to join us. I see some people are still coming into the room. Welcome. We'll get started at about 5 after. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. Again, I just keep saying welcome as we have more folks coming into the room. And I'll go ahead and get us started for today. So my name is Bianca Machuda. If you haven't met me yet, I am a community engagement specialist with Austin Development Services. And again, thanks for being here with the Land Development Academy as we continue our sessions where we look more deeply at the site plan review process. We have experts from across the City of Austin departments that join us, and we talk about their work with site plans. So again, we've got a good number of participants with us today, and I want to ask you for your help to track attendance. If you happen to be attending with a group of people, can you put in the chat how many people are seated with you today? If you're by yourself, no need, but if you've got a group of colleagues and you all are using a conference room or something like that, let us know. And I'll go ahead to the next slide. We're going to review our engagement format for today's meeting. So as usual, we've got the presentation and then we'll be followed by a Q&A session. So we've got 1 hour set aside for the program. And your questions during the presentation can be posted to the Q&A bank. Actually, at any time, you can use a Q&A bank. It's got that little icon that you see there. It has a little question mark and a speech bubble, and you can type your questions in, or you can wait until the Q&A session at the end of the presentation, where you can also raise your hand to speak verbally, and we will allow you to unmute and pose your question out loud. So you can do either of those. We hope to be able to answer all of your questions, but if there is a question that we don't have information for right away, we'll post a follow-up response later on. There will be a Q&A summary that's going to go out to all of our attendees today, and you'll also get a copy of the slide deck. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Kenna, who is going to be our main presenter today.
Thanks, Bianca. Hi, I'm Kenna Pierce, and I am the supervising engineer for the Drainage and Water Quality Review team. My boss is Joydeep Goswami, who most of you know, probably, or a lot of people know the city really well. He's been there a long time. And then I have with me Kyle Ver, who is the water quality lead for our team. Our team is housed in the Land Use Review Division in the Austin Development Services Department, and we do water quality and drainage review for site plans, subdivisions, construction plans. We do grading and drainage for residential review. We do zoning, easement releases, and license agreements, among a couple of other things. So we do a lot of drainage and water quality review for applications at the city. We're the main group that does it. Drainage and water quality is basically regulated by Austin Watershed Protection, but the review group for that, for the code and criteria, is housed in the Austin Development Services Department. And here's our little org chart. So I've got about 13 people on the team. So we're here to talk about stormwater quality today, or stormwater today, and then specifically with water quality. If you are not in the industry, you might not realize that stormwater quality is different from wastewater, and it's different from water. Water and wastewater are regulated by Austin Water Utility. Stormwater in the city of Austin is regulated by the Austin Watershed Protection Department. They are two separate entities, two separate things, right? Regulated by two separate entities. And the stormwater quality code is in Title VI of the Code of Ordinances. And a lot of that has to do with point discharges and water from industrial water. And then there's Title 25, which is the Land Development Code, and it's regulated under the Environment section, which is Chapter 8. So regulation to address pollution in creeks, lakes, and aquifers associated with business activities and stormwater. So we want our water quality to be really great when it goes into the waters and the creeks. So we have these regulations that we use to try to protect our environment. And there's different categories of like ways that you can look at protecting it and regulating it. One of them is like the point source category. So basically I have this business and I release my wastewater from my process to a pipe, and that pipe eventually goes to the creek. That stuff is regulated under stormwater discharge permits. And that's more the Chapter 5 in Title 6 area. And then there's the non-point source stormwater, which is regulated under the Land Development Code Environment section. And that's from development, just from us building in our environment, water falling on the ground. It is not a one single point of discharge. So, and that's where my group comes in. Oh. There we go. Thank you. So again, I'm going to talk about the non-point source pollutant control mechanisms, and this is regulated during the development process. And there are kind of like three ways we regulate it. The first way is basically saying, oh, this area is environmentally sensitive and we don't want you to build there. Because if you build there, there's no way to make the pollutants, to capture the pollutants before they get into these environmentally sensitive areas. So restricting development is one of the main ways we are able to regulate our stormwater. So I have critical water quality zone, water quality transition zone. That's what those initials mean. And then there's the Barton Springs zone. We have rules that say you can't build here. You can only put so much impervious cover there. And this basically allows us to make sure we don't have direct pollutant discharge close to these environmentally sensitive areas. Another way that we regulate stormwater is during construction, and we have temporary erosion and sediment controls. So during construction, I don't know if you drive around town and you see these black fences around a construction site. That's called a silt fence, and they're used to make sure that when it rains, all the dirt and the construction materials don't slide off the site into our roads and creeks. Right. My group doesn't do that. That's the EV group. And there was another session on that. What my group does do is the last one, which is permanent stormwater treatment controls. That is the water quality review team. And we also do drainage, but the water quality review team's purview. And what we do is we make sure that development has, if required, ways to mitigate the pollutants in their stormwater from their site before they're being released, before the water is released from the site. So we treat water from developed surfaces to remove pollutants before the water is released to the system. And that is what my group regulates, and that is what we review during the land development application process. So the three big ways are basically restricting development, making sure that during construction, lots of pollutants are not released from the site. And then after construction, we still mitigate your pollutants through permanent stormwater controls. So we're going to just talk a little bit about stormwater basics, treatment basics. This is super duper shallow, but you might be like, well, where do these stormwater pollutants come from? Basically, we're talking about increased pollution due to development. So when you decide to put up a big giant store that we all love to go to, you are taking that green land that was there and covering it with asphalt, concrete, building. All of this is called impervious cover because it prevents water from infiltrating into the ground. And all of this impervious cover increases the concentration of pollutants on that property from daily use. Think about taking your car, and I'm going to Walmart and I got my 2006 Honda CRV and it has a little oil leak. Well, then it leaks on the ground, water falls, and do we want that stuff hitting our creeks? The answer is no. So development just inherently can increase pollutant concentrations. Again, the next one is like rainwater falls on this development, this impervious cover, picks up these pollutants and carries them off site. Where do they go? A lot of times you might not think about it, if you're not an engineer or you don't think about it, but it goes to the storm drainage system, which consists of pipes. It can be creeks, lakes, and this is called the gray funnel. We're just taking all of these pollutants that, are from our daily lives and our development and just directing them directly into our creeks, lakes, and rivers. And that's what the city of Austin has been very concerned with since, I guess, at least the 80s and the 90s. We have a lot of environmental regulations here to help mitigate a lot of this stuff. Some examples of modern monitored pollutants are in the last bullet point: chemical oxygen demand, E. coli, floatables, phosphorus, and nitrogen, which are called, never mind. So these are the things that we're interested in. And how do we get these things out of our stormwater before it leaves the site? And there are 3 ways that we can do that. In general, the first way is sedimentation, is where, the water comes into your pond and then all the, pollutants basically settle to the ground. This is very common in wastewater and water treatment too. So settling of pollutants that are suspended in the water, and what you have to do is you have to make sure they're able to stay in that sedimentation basin long enough to have the pollutants settle out, which is a function of settling velocity and time in the basin. Another way to remove pollutants is through filtration. And in this picture, you see the sedimentation chamber. The water is going from that little splitter box on the left to the filtration basin. So pollutants are settling out in the sedimentation basin. As the water enters the filtration basin, then we have our plant and our media that help remove pollutants, uptake of pollutants by biological media and their processes. And then a third way that we can help keep pollutants from leaving the property and entering our creeks is basically through infiltration. And you're like, well, what about groundwater? We can talk about that later. But that is not shown on this slide, but this is really common in the Barton Springs zone. Basically, we make all the water, we re-irrigate it on the ground so it infiltrates into the land, and therefore there's no pollutants, no increased level of pollutants leaving the property. This depends on the soil type and the infiltration rate, but these are basically the 3 ways that pollutants are removed from stormwater. So we're interested in removing pollutants from our stormwater. They're a result of development. And how do we regulate that development? We regulate it through, site plan applications and subdivision applications. And when you come in with your application, my team gets it and we review it. And we decide whether water quality controls are required based on these rules in the Land Development Code. Again, it's Chapter 8, which is titled The Environment. And if you look in this code, there's so many rules, but you can go to 211 and be like, does my development require water quality controls? And if you look at point A, if you are developing in the Barton Springs zone, then you require water quality controls. So there's a very sensitive part of town called the Barton Springs zone. We have this blind salamander there, and we are very worried and making sure we are very sensitive to and making sure that it is able to thrive, right? So if you're in the Barton Springs zone and you're putting it doesn't matter the size of the development. You can put a giant store or you can put like a little bitty gas station. You're required to have water quality controls to mitigate the pollutants leaving your site as a result from the development. That's not the entire part of town though. We got the rest of the town. So that's B, in watersheds other than the Barton Springs zone. Basically, you go to number 3. That's where most of it hits the pavement. If you are adding 8,000 square feet of new or redeveloped impervious cover, then you need water quality controls. Number 1 is if you are developing the water transition zone. Most people don't develop there. There are lots of other rules. And then number 2 is like if you have a grass golf course and you're going to use pesticides, you need water quality controls. We don't see those very often. The one that we usually see is number 3. Hey, I'm building this apartment complex. It's 10,000 square feet. Do I need water quality controls? And the answer is yes, because the threshold is 8,000. Once you reach that threshold of development on your property, we require water quality controls. Then there's some other caveats here. Some important ones are basically F for public mobility projects. Say you're say you're the city of Austin and you're building a road, there's some caveats there when your water quality controls are required. It's still basically 8,000 square feet, but since they're long linear projects, we have to look at it a little differently when we're placing the water quality controls. And then there's some more information about what counts as impervious cover for a roadway in section F. So the important thing is I'm not putting in 8,000 square feet. I'm only putting in 2,000, and I'm not in the Barton Springs zone. I don't need water quality controls. I'm putting in 8,000. I do need water quality controls. Now I have a little chart. Oh, wait. This is the Barton Springs zone. Just thought everybody might want to look at it. It's basically the southwest part of town. I don't know if you are very knowledgeable about what watershed you live in, but we have lots of little, lots of beautiful graphics online. But if you're in like Slaughter Creek, which is watershed, the west part, then you're in the Barton Springs zone. If you're in the west part of Williamson Creek, you're in the Barton Springs zone. I don't know if, well, it depends. Like if you're at Wheatsville on South First, on South Lamar, you're not in the Barton Springs zone. If you're across the street at the Starbucks, you're in the Barton Springs zone. So it's very dependent on the geology, and it's basically all the area of town that goes to this one discharge point in Barton Creek. And then you're in the Barton Springs zone. And if you're in the Barton Springs zone, you are required to do water quality control. So I just want to show you a picture. If you're on the east side of town, you're good. North side of town, you're good. Southwest, it's a little dicey. You might be in the Barton Springs zone. So here's a table. It just kind of outlines when you need water quality controls. 500 square feet of impervious cover outside the Barton Springs zone, don't need controls. Inside the Barton Springs zone, you need controls. Golf course, which uses fertilizer. That's an important caveat because it says specifically fertilizer, pesticides, then you need water quality controls. I'm only doing 2,000 square feet. I have a small store and 4 parking spots. Outside the Barton Springs zone, don't need water quality controls. It's only 2,000. Inside the Barton Springs zone, need water quality controls. And then there's the threshold of 8,000. It doesn't matter where you are in town, water quality controls are required. We get this a lot. A development application comes in. They didn't realize they needed water quality controls. They didn't plan for it. Oh, can we get out of water quality controls? And the answer is no. You have to provide water quality controls if you are required to provide water quality controls. The land use, the section 8 in the LDC has little caveats for, like, they call them variances. So you must provide this unless you meet this condition, then you can get a variance. And that's in section 25.841. There's nothing that gets you out of water quality controls in that section. And then there's another section of also potential variances. And there's nothing in there either that gets a development out of water quality controls if they need to provide them. So that is a difficult conversation sometimes to have. But water quality controls are very important to the city of Austin. This goes back to, I have to provide water quality controls. There's nothing in the code that gets you out of water quality controls. And just so you know, there's no way I can waive your water quality controls. The Austin Development Services can't say, you know, we understand you, we don't think you need it. That doesn't happen because you have to provide water quality controls. The regulating department, Austin Watershed, is the authority for the water quality control requirements. And they're going to expect you to provide water quality controls, but they do have a couple of ways where you can, instead of providing the ones that we usually see in the city, you can provide something else. And that's called an innovative management practice. And that's in 25.8.151. And there are lots of rules for that. And basically, you're still providing water quality controls, just a different kind than what we usually regulate. Another item that I've seen come, across my desk is alternative equivalent compliance. So say you are providing water quality controls, but they're just a little different. Maybe you're using something that we don't usually see used in that fashion. For instance, the airport, they have all these rules about not encouraging birds or wildlife. Well, a lot of our water quality controls are very popular with, you call it birds, wildlife, bugs. So they have to have kind of special water quality controls that basically don't attract that kind of thing. They still have water quality controls, but it's an alternative compliance. If you are interested in doing a development, but you don't want to provide traditional water quality controls, you need to get that checked out before you submit your stuff, because negotiating these things take time and they require advanced modeling. If you're just, the everyday person and you're like, I want to put a gas station here, you probably just want to provide regular water quality controls, because to go through this other process, you're going to have to hire an engineer. They're going to have special modeling skills, because they're going to have to model how your proposed design removes pollutants to the city of Austin standards. We're very serious about water quality controls, right? And these negotiations can take time away from your permitting process. So that's important. There is one area of town where you're still technically providing water quality controls per the LDC, but you're not putting a pond on your site. And that is when you pay money in lieu of providing structural water quality controls. So in the land development code, there's provide a pond, some sort of pond on your site. Or if you're in this super duper special group of development properties, you can pay instead of providing water quality controls. And I have here on this screen, hope you can see it, right in the middle, it says urban. So in Austin, we have these different levels of watersheds. We've got the suburban, we've got the urban, we've got the Barton Springs zone. If you're in the urban watershed and you meet certain requirements, you can pay for water quality controls. You can use a payment instead of building water quality controls. You're still meeting the land development code's requirement for water quality controls, but instead you're paying into this fee, and then the city of Austin takes that money and we either build new water quality controls or update old water quality controls that need maintenance. So that is in section 28.214, and it's got this long title, optional payment instead of structural controls. We call it payment in lieu, right? This is not a fee, so that's very important. We have a lot of fees with our permitting process, and if you're like a certain type of development, a lot of times you can get fees waived. This is not a fee. This is a payment instead of building your own water quality controls. And it says right here on C, that's the big one, instead of providing water quality controls under that section 25.811, you can pay. If you are in the urban watershed, an applicant may request approval to deposit with the city a non-refundable cash payment. So instead of building your own, you're paying. This is not an option for everyone. You have to meet the requirements. That's what it says in, you have to meet the requirements in the ECM, the environmental criteria manual. And that says here somewhere. I have to figure out what that is. I don't see it said here. Maybe it's in another one. But so there's provide water quality controls, or you can pay. So here we are. we have to provide water quality controls. And if you're interested, well, what are my requirements? That's in section 25.8.213, right here. It says it has to be designed in accordance with the environmental criteria manual. So this is really important. We have the land development code at the city, and it tells us basically the rules we need to follow. And then a lot of these rules, you can go look in a criteria manual for, well, how do I meet these rules? So there's the drainage criteria manual, there's the environmental criteria manual, there's the utility criteria manual. And for water quality controls, we look in the environmental criteria manual, which we call the ECM, environmental criteria manual. And it has all the information you need. One of the most important is whatever control you provide basically provides the treatment of something called a sedimentation filtration system. All of our controls meet the pollutant level reduction requirements of this system. Another important thing here that gets caught during review is these systems need to be maintainable and they need to be inspectable, because the city will come in on your private property and inspect your water quality controls and your detention, because it needs to be working, right, in order for you to be compliant with your permit. This section also has how much water quality treatment you need to provide. That's section B. And basically they call this the capture volume, and it is quantified as the first 1/2 inch of runoff. And number 2, you have to add 10%. Oh, for each 10% increase over 20%, you add 1/10 of an inch. So that gets a little fun. Also, this new ordinance from, I think it was 2022, we have to use green stormwater controls. Okay. So you have to provide water quality controls. If you can't pay, then these are the requirements for your water quality controls. This is a continuation of that section. Basically, you have to put it in a place where you avoid recharge features, difficult slopes or high slopes. And then section F is special for the Barton Spring zone. Notice that the Barton Spring zone has a lot more requirements. You have to substantiate the pollutant removal efficiency, right, with a published literature or variable engineering study, unless you're going to do it through what we have at the ECM. So Barton Spring zone can be a little more challenging. So you're like, okay, I think I have to provide water quality controls, but it's all based on something called impervious cover. If you want to know what impervious cover is defined at, that is also in the land development code. So impervious cover is basically anything that blocks the infiltration of water into the soil. So road, driveways, parking areas. This stuff is pretty, you can think about it and go, is this going to block the infiltration of water? If it is, it's considered impervious cover. This is not an all-inclusive list, right? There are some exclusions to impervious cover. So for instance, the sidewalks in the public right-of-way, we pretend like they're not impervious cover. So you don't have to provide water quality controls for them. Trails, the beautiful trails that we have all over town, they're not considered impervious cover for water quality control. They are for detention. It's a different problem, but not water quality controls. Your detention basins, the water quality controls that you install on site, we don't count that as impervious cover. Any sort of drainage infrastructure. This is a fun one here. Ground level pools, fountains, and ponds are not considered impervious cover. Gravel placed over pervious surfaces. So this is not an all-inclusive list. I didn't put the whole thing in here, but these are the most common ones. So if you are a developer and you're like, okay, I'm getting close to that 8,000, you might want to check this list and see if you have anything that fits on it to remove some of your impervious cover as being calculated towards your water quality control requirements. And a lot of times we see trails and sidewalks. They're like, Kenna, this doesn't count. You're right, it doesn't count. You do not have to treat this area for water quality. You do still have to do it for detention, but that's a different lecture, right? Oh, that came up later. So this right here, beautiful. I love this place. I love walking down here. It's not impervious cover for water quality controls, even though it's right next to a river. Types of water quality controls. How am I doing on time? I probably need to be moving. So again, we have all the rules in the land development code. And then if you want to know, well, what specifically are these things that I'm supposed to be putting on my property to treat water quality, you go to the environmental criteria manual, and the water quality is section 160. Oh, the design for water quality controls is 160. So as you can see on the right, there's lots of stuff. There's the general guidelines, maintenance and construction requirements, and then there's the different types of water quality controls. Basically, almost all water quality controls in the city have kind of the same, there's a couple of the same design requirements. For instance, you have the water quality volume. You size your pond. I'm just going to say pond. There are some other things, but you size your pond based on how much volume you are supposed to treat, right? Usually there's something called a splitter structure. And I don't know what you guys do, but before I had this job, I just drove around town and I never noticed water quality or detention ponds, even though I have a civil engineering degree. I was more of a pavement person before this job, but now I drive around town and I'm like, oh, there's a giant concrete structure in front of this deep, big hole in the ground. That's the splitter box, and the big hole in the ground is the water quality pond, right? And the splitter structure, what it does is the water comes in there because you don't have to treat all the rainfall that falls on your site. You only have to treat your water quality volume, which is also called the first flush. And so the water goes into the splitter box, and the splitter is designed in a way that water goes into the water quality pond until a certain elevation. And after that elevation, the rest of the water splits off. Either goes to your detention pond or directly to the storm sewer, depending on their design. So if you drive around town and you're like, oh, there's a big giant concrete structure next to a big deep hole or a pond, that's the splitter box, right? It's pretty interesting. It's also used to reduce the velocity of the water coming into the pond because we want the ponds to not erode when fast water is running into them. The ECM also talks about the pollutant removal standards. I mentioned this before. There's a little section in the ECM and it gives the list of pollutants and what we want their concentrations to be after going through the pond. And it's all based on modeling. And what we did is they made all the requirements based on how a pond called the sediment filtration pond removes pollutants. So we've got a lot of different options in the ECM that you could use on your site, but they all remove pollutants to the level of a sed fill pond, which is important. Because why do it if it's not going to remove anything? So other examples of ponds are like biofiltration ponds. It's a large pond. They got the sedimentation section, the filtration section. It was basically the picture I showed you earlier. These ponds take up space. They need something called under drains, which are pipes. They need special media. Sometimes they need retaining walls and plants. So if you have a large area that you're developing, like a Costco, you might want to do a biofiltration pond. You might want to look for the biofiltration ponds around town. Another thing you could do, say you just have like a small development. Instead of a full-blown biofiltration pond, you can use a rain garden, which are basically one basin. They're smaller. They usually use under drains or pipes in them, but sometimes they don't, depending on your development and your soils. There's also vegetative filter strips, which is basically a big grassy area where you spread the water, and it's supposed to only move over there at a certain rate so pollutants can drop out, right? So there's lots of different options, and they're listed here on the right. So retention irrigation systems are what is required to be used in the Barton Spring zone. Vegetative filter strips, biofiltration ponds, rainwater harvesting, you know, the big cisterns on the side of the buildings, porous pavement. You might notice some porous pavement in town if you're walking on like a sidewalk that you're like, this isn't a normal concrete sidewalk. They might have used porous pavement. And this is a really interesting option because it's self-treating. If you design it per the criteria, the water will fall on it, infiltrate, and it's self-treating. So you don't have to take that water that falls on this section and transport it to another pond. I have never seen anybody use non-required vegetation, but there's always a first. And then rain gardens. Rain gardens are super popular. They're very easy. There's always room for a rain garden. It's what our water quality lead says. These are just some of the things that come up when we do reviews. I'm not going to go over the design aspects of ponds. If you want to know a lot about how to design water quality ponds and how to interpret the ECM, let Bianca know so she can set up a different webinar. This is just basically on when we require water quality ponds and just a little bit about the design. But one of the things this slide is about, like, what happens when in development and we're reviewing something. These are some really common items. We can't capture this area, Kenna. It's a driveway and it runs off into the street. That is so common, but don't worry, we can help you out. There are a lot of different options you have for, like, maybe if you can't capture this area, you can capture an equivalent area that's not being treated, right? And instead capture that area and take it to your pond. And interesting to note is this is really common. It makes complete sense. Oh, Kenna, our water quality pond only needs to be 4,000 cubic feet, and we're providing 6,000 cubic feet volume of treatment, and we're over treating. Unfortunately, over treating is not a thing because we want to only treat the first flush of water that falls on the ground. That is where all the pollutants are. So that's something else that comes up. I can't treat this area. I'm going to over treat this area. We'll usually work with you and figure something else out because that's not going to work. If you have a project in the right of way, this is really common with our city projects. There's no place to put stuff. Well, a lot of times they have to go out and buy easements for ponds, and you guys see ponds on the road when you're driving around town. You just might not have noticed them. Even the city of Austin has to provide water quality controls. We are that serious. There's a lot of problems like, I don't have enough space. I don't have utility conflicts. Oh, there's trees. So we work a lot with developers and city staff on figuring out how to provide water quality treatment. Another thing we see when we do review is that, oh, I've got this old pond from 97. I'm going to use it. Yes, you're welcome to use it. We do have to make sure it still provides the level of treatment that is required today, unless you have a vested rights situation. But a lot of our ponds around town, they're old, and some of them actually still work. So that's something that we work with in review also. I need to get moving because I think it's almost done. Some important items that affect your pond design are the maintenance, right? You got to be able to get in there. You got to be able to mow. You got to be able to clean out the splitter box. That's something that we see. We have all sorts of requirements in the DCM, which is not the ECM. In the drainage criteria manual, we have a lot of requirements for detention ponds and water quality ponds. All of this stuff ends up making the footprint of your pond bigger. And I apologize because I know you want every square inch for your house or your apartment or your parking. We need parking, but we we're not required to have parking, but I prefer parking. But anyway, it does make your pond bigger, but it's really important because if your pond doesn't work, you get in trouble because you have a notice of violation. So that's something that's important to think about when you're doing a water quality pond. I'm just going to rush through these examples. Here's an example of a water quality pond off South Slaughter. You probably, if you're down this way, you pass it, you don't notice it. This is an example of a said fill pond. You can see these pipes right here. Well, maybe you can't see them, but there's a little pipes back in the back. This is the filtration section. And then we have the gabion wall. This is an example of a rain garden. If you're on property profile, which is the city's GIS, water quality detention ponds come up with city maintained ones come up with this green hatch stripes polygons. And this is an example of one. You probably drive by this every day and you're either like, that person needs to mow their lawn, or that's a really interesting garden. It's a rain garden and it is here to provide water quality for probably this street. I haven't looked at this one yet, but in this case, you notice there's no place around the water quality pond to park or to maintain it. So you got to park on the street. But that's just a little bit about water quality controls. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Kyle or I. A lot of times, if people are getting ready to submit something and they're like, I need help with this, we are completely available to meet. It's not a problem. We are here for you. Thank you. What do I do now, Bianca?
Thanks, Kenna. Hang tight. So we're gonna enter into our Q&A portion. We still have about 12 minutes left on the clock for today's presentation. Are there any questions from the audience? As we mentioned in the beginning of the program, you can ask a question by using the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to speak. Or if you prefer to type your question out, you can still submit questions to the Q&A box. So I don't have any open questions right now, but I'll give it a couple minutes just in case anyone has a question before we wrap it up for today. In the meantime, you can see on the screen there, we would love to know what you thought about today's presentation. Go ahead and follow that QR code, or I'm about to drop some information into the chat. Let us know how we did today. And also, if you want to keep up with the Land Development Academy, you can visit our webpage, and we keep posting there all of the sessions that are coming up. And we also post the recordings and materials from past sessions in the resources tab. So if you didn't catch the wetlands presentation that was happening last week, Kenna mentioned the critical water quality zone and some different things like that. We just had a presentation. We've had several presentations that talk about water quality zones and what are they called? The classifications as well, watershed classifications, and you can learn a little bit more about those that way. There was information about it for environmental review. We talk about some of those mitigating, I don't know if they're called mitigating, but some of those control factors that happen on construction sites, like the silt fences and slope requirements and things like that. So I do see we got a question. Oh, nope, we just got a comment. We've got a fan in the audience that said, excellent presentation, Kenna.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Was that my mom?
I'll tell you who it was later.
My mom.
It was not your mom. All right, well, I guess we're gonna wrap it up, y'all. Come back on Tuesday, November 18th. Kenna's gonna be with us again, and she has the honor of closing us out for the year. I do want to let everyone know and reassure you that we will still have presentations in 2026, but don't miss out on our last presentation of the year here, November 18th. We'll be talking about how drainage requirements protect Austinites. Any closing words, Kenna?
No, I know this was a very wordy presentation, so I appreciate y'all's patience with me. And again, if you have any questions or want to talk about water quality controls, call Kyle and me, but especially Kyle.
Sounds good. Well, thanks everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks. And until then, we're signing off.
Thank you.